Hey everybody, welcome back. I'm Emily Moyer and this is Strange Mosaic. And this is kind of cool today because the reason that I titled my new sort of show Strange Mosaic was based on a chat that we had that was kind of a show that Darren and I did several months ago. And when I was done with that chat, I was like, that was like a weird combination of topics that we talked about. I'm going to call it Strange Mosaic. And then I was like, I think I like that for my show going forward because I don't want to do such like single topic driven shows anymore. I wanted to have wide ranging conversations, connect the dot kind of conversations. So that show you and I did, Darren, it inspired what became my new show, which is Strange Mosaic. And so this is your now you get an official episode with the thumbnail that's poster just for you and all that kind of jazz. So welcome back to the show that you inspired, Darren. How you doing?
Well, as the old saying goes, all good things start with me. So thank you very much for having me on the show.
Awesome. So you and I have been keeping in regular contact during this kind of whole unusual period that we've been living in right now. And I know you have a lot of updates that you send to a lot of your friends. And then you and I also have some personal back and forth here. So while there's millions of things literally we could talk about, you have like a select list of things that you wanted to do this time. And he has his list and I have a copy as well. And we were going to get into some interesting things about some dance music because Darren's interested in that as well, both the scene itself and some of the characters. And there's a few really interesting threads there to pull on, but we've decided that that is a show in and of itself. So not to include it with all of these other things. So we're going to get the random laundry list today. And another time soon, we will be doing a dance music special. So we can look forward to that. But Darren, let's jump right in. You've got a fairly lengthy list here and lots of, and I'm sure like we could probably add more things to the list as we chat. So, let's get going and let's start right in here. And I think this is an interesting place to start. And it's one of the things I like about you, which is you're not afraid to go oppositional, to oppose the general consensus of the alternative community on things. It's one of the things I like about you. But I also think that you have a really unique perspective in doing that because, as we talked about last time you were on, you move a little slower than someone like I does, like I do, and that's not a lesser than thing. It just gives you like a different pace that you watch things at, and you catch things that I and others who are busy running around like chickens with our head cut off miss. And I think some of these points you have are fair, even the ones that I am going to push back on a bit and disagree with, I think are well thought out. And I think the overall premise on a certain level I can get on board with. So why don't you take us into your topic number one, which is the arrogance of the alternative research community regarding our uninvited friend from Wuhan. Take it away.
It is my disclaimer, audience, that I believe COVID-19, commonly known as the coronavirus, was deliberately released by the executive leadership of the Chinese Communist Party under Major General Chen Wei's scientific evil with the aim of destabilizing the presidency and the 2020 presidential election of Donald Trump. It is not fake, it is not fiction, it is warfare of a new kind. So some people may think, where is his agenda? I've just said that's my agenda. And because I say this agenda, people within the alternative research community have branded me stupid, idiotic, foolish, blinded by the mainstream media, a shill, a government operative, and a sheeple.
All of those things simultaneously. Wow, that's quite a long title. That like when people have a lot of degrees, there's a lot of letters behind their names. That's a lot of titles you hold there.
And
almost as many as Federer and Nadal. There you go.
and what it is, the research community I embraced was led by a man called Freeman Fly that goes by the name of Freeman. And he was the one that truly got me into this. And his approach, which is still an approach, is one of love, understanding, and compassion. And if an individual calls somebody else an insult that person isn't going to turn around and say, oh, thank you for calling me a jackass. It's changed my life. I'll improve my life. Yeah. Thank you for giving me that boost and calling me an idiot and a clown. It's what I've always needed in my life, to be called an idiot, a blind person, whoopee. And it's not. What we have to do is, if somebody believes this is fake, then I will listen to them and I will give them the benefit of the doubt. I've got a friend that will get this message, who is a firm believer in QAnon. Mm-hmm. He believes that the majority of the leadership of the Anglo-American world are either incarcerated in Guantanamo Bay or have been executed and have been replaced by clones. Mm-hmm. And I could laugh at him and call him an idiot, and he is blinded by the Q drops and he's addicted to it every day in this game, in this mystique. But I listen to what he has to say, because in my heritage, which is Nigerian, it states that a fool will now and again say a wise thing. And that means you have to listen to everybody, because in a way we're all fools, because we all get tricked by this system. We all get pulled and manipulated. I know people in China or the Philippines make Nike trainers for like next to nothing, but I'll still buy the Nike trainers because I like them. So I am a hypocrite. I have elements of being blinded and manipulated by this, but I'm willing to take ownership of that. And I'm willing in my own way to accept it and admit it, because that's the first stage of resolution. Mm-hmm. But by now we have this thing of, the other day I was walking out of a supermarket where I live. It's one of the biggest Tesco supermarkets in the United Kingdom. I think it's in the top 3. And as I'm coming out with my mask, a man, head to toe in Under Armour, about 51 years old, is smirking at me. And I knew straight away what he was. He was one of these people that sits till 3 a.m. smoking weed and watching YouTube videos. And he thinks he's the expert on this. And virologists don't wear Under Armour head to toe. So I don't need him giving me snide looks, thinking he's superior and I'm inferior. The creator, whatever made this existence, will not like people being in smug arrogance of each other. We're supposed to build each other up. Mm-hmm. And if you disagree with someone, politely disagree. There's some things that you can't politely disagree with people. But my last point on this is Alex Haley, who wrote the book Roots that became the award-winning television show. Mm-hmm. Afterwards, he was given a role by Playboy magazine to spend a month with the California branch of the Aryan Brotherhood. Mm-hmm. And they believe that basically all black people are genetically inferior. Mm-hmm. And because of his poise and manner and how he communicated and interacted with their members, even they turned to him and said, we now believe that you are not inferior to us. In some ways, you're more intellectual than us. Mm-hmm. So they went from a superiority complex to one of racial separation. Mm-hmm. So even Alex Haley and how he conducted himself, he could have belittled the men, he could have insulted them, but he wanted to listen to what they were saying and how they were saying it, and then put forward the counter argument. And that is how we build, and we need to go back to that beginning level of this. Even early Red Ice Radio, before the white supremacy or the thing around immigration and their change in politics, early Red Ice Radio was about that. It was about bringing groups of diverse people together, like Sonia Barrett, who was a black woman, and allowing them to have a platform. And it wasn't ridiculing people, it was so people could get turned on. And now we're turning each other off because we want to say, well, I when I go to a supermarket, I don't wear a mask. I'm some valiant warrior of truth. It's like, no, a valiant warrior of truth is when that military man knocks on your door with an assault rifle and his other friends got the needle. And you've got the choice. Do you run out of your front window and never come back and live on the lam? Or do you say, all right, then stick it in me arm? But either way, I've got compassion for both. And this is what we have lost around this whole debate in the Anglo-American world since March.
Yeah, okay, so there's several threads I'm going to kind of pull on there, and I think they're all good points. So I wasn't aware that in the alternative research community, thinking that this was a virus that was let loose from the lab in Wuhan, that was not an acceptable position. Like, I see people, I guess they're in what I would consider more like the politically right-wing faction of the alternative research community, who like maybe think that, like people who like to read Epic Times, right? That kind of, I think that's pretty, but I don't get into back and forths on Twitter with people. So I believe that you could be correct there in that there, and I know this from like past experiences with the stuff with like the school shootings and Boston bombings and things like that, that like there got to a point where if you didn't believe it was a hoax, then you were just stupid. Everything is totally made up. And if you're not willing to say that everything is totally made up, then you're just a blind sheeple who deserves whatever you get and da-da-da-da. And I think that's actually part of the reason why they did do a few of those hoax events, was to create that fissure in the alternative media, that there would be this group of people that insisted everything was fake, right? When the truth is that, like, I think we're probably dealing with, on a certain level, a mix, right? If you trace back like the work that like David Martin is doing, where he's basically saying, yeah, there was a created an enhanced virus that started here in the United States, that eventually the funding supposedly got pulled for, that was being worked on at University of North Carolina, and they shipped the stuff over to Wuhan and funded Wuhan to do that, right? Yeah. So if that is a truth, and there seems to be, not that paperwork can't be made up, but there seems to be a paper and a financial trail that says that is so, then I think it's certainly a reasonable theory or hypothesis to operate from, that there was a bioweapon or an enhanced virus that was released, whether accidentally or intentionally. I think either one would be reasonable to have as your main theory. I always have like maybe a main theory and a few side theories and something else I'm looking off in the corner, and the truth is probably some combination thereof, right? Like, I think there are elements of this operation, whatever it is an operation of some sorts. This isn't just, oh my God, a coincidental happenstance, right? There are elements of it that definitely are being like faked or hoaxed. And then there are other elements that are certainly either very, very real already or stand to become real at any moment. Like, I know people who think that like round one was a hoax, but round two is going to be real, or round one was a virus, but round two will be a bioweapon, right? Like, I think for my own personal opinion of where we're at now, I guess I don't, to me, the part that's important and the part that I understand from how health works, right, is that the idea that a mask is going to save you from infection is silly, right? Like, I know that like having a robust immune system and a healthy lifestyle is the most important part, and that is never encouraged by any of the authorities. It's always just like, right. So to me, that's the hoax, that if there is this scary thing out there, that somehow standing away from people you love and wearing a mask is going to be the thing that saves your life. That part to me is the part where there's the most amount of dishonesty, right, that is affecting us greatly. And so we have this situation where the battleground has become the mask instead of the battleground becoming actually knowing things, right? Like, there's plenty of lines of research you could go down that would prove that all of these agencies that are in charge of this have run hoaxes, have run drills, also have engaged in immoral and unethical research to do things like gain of function studies in viruses and, sharing these kinds of testing things with people who are supposedly at some kind of war with, but then why are you passing off our genetically enhanced viruses to them to work on? And, there's all this stuff. So, I think that we're looking at a very special mess here, so that's what I have to say about like the Wuhan or hoax question. I think there's elements of both, in my opinion. And for someone to say that it's stupid for you to believe what you believe, I think that's stupid.
I also one of the things that people in the alternative research community suffer from, and you have this issue, I would suspect, and it's one of the reasons why I don't have a platform like yours, is because people want to find the guru and the savior.
Mm-hmm.
So what they'll do is they'll pin all their hopes on David Icke, to use an example, and they will say, well, that's my guy, and whatever he says goes. But the initial part of this alternative research community was for you to see what these people were saying, but then yourself grow into your own ideology and your own thinking.
Yeah.
Because just to believe their dogma is like a Catholic person believing the dogma of the Pope.
Yeah.
And it doesn't create a new thing. It's just a replication of old dogma. And the other thing that people again aren't realizing, because they either want the newsreader to tell them what's going on, or do you want the leading alternative researcher to tell them what's going on, is why is there no solid Western mainstream media coverage out of Wuhan? It was there for about a month to 2 months, and after that, you no correspondence. I want to know what's going on in Wuhan. I want to know why they're having raves in Wuhan. Is that fake? Is that real? Why are people getting infected? What is going on the ground in Wuhan, China? And when news organizations do, like last week, the Financial Times did a week-long expose on all levels of this, and the first one was about Wuhan and what it was going on and what is going on, and the BBC never referred to it on the television news, and this is the Financial Times, and Sky didn't, and the Guardian didn't. I think the Daily Mail might have given it some notice, but the majority of the world's mainstream media ignored the FT, and that is a paid subscription site. But for this series, they felt it was so important, they lifted the firewall for these articles. So you'd think that like these major news organizations, these contemporaries, would say, right, the FT's gone on the ground in Wuhan. They've got concerns that people are being literally disappeared. They're talking and telling the truth. So we have to really look into this. Nothing. So again, so instead of the alternative research community saying, well, what is going on? They're now like, say, the ordinary Joes and ordinary Janes that just switch on the television and want Lester in his pocket napkin and his fancy suit of a night to tell you what's going on in America, or do you want Hugh Edwards to tell you what's going on at 10 p.m. in the United Kingdom? So I'm a bit disappointed with the alternative research community on this, to be honest.
Yeah, I think that, well, a couple of things I want to address. The thing that you said about like the guru stuff, I talk about so many topics, and I have intentionally done, I resist people when they ask me to cover something more. Like, I don't really do that. I have my own theories that like I keep a consistent thread on, that are my own personal things that have nothing to really do with the news. But I try not. I don't like guru stuff. I was not raised in a religious household, and so that doesn't appeal to me. in any way. And I've also watched people who like have become religious in their anti-religiosity also become guru focused. And, you know, like to me, I don't like that. Like I'm just a person here saying what I think. And I'm wrong just as much as some other people are wrong. I get some things right. I'm kind of like your analogy of the fool. Every once in a while, they come up with a nugget, you know, whatever. I do think I'll say this to that comment as well about the fool. One of the most important pieces of information to put the whole picture together for me of what was happening, like at a very, not early on in my waking up, but at a certain crucial point where we were moving into this sort of transhumanism singularity kind of, so somewhere around 2011, someone who delivers not only what I would call misinformation or disinformation, but almost non-information, right? Like something that for some reason, I was like, why am I listening to this? But I was for some reasoning, like, this is stupid. Like they drew my attention to the fact that there was a reason why when we first started having mobile phones, they called them cellular phones, and we all had cellular phone contracts. And that was basically at that point the sort of acknowledgement and the okay that we were fine to move into this adjustment to our cellular system based on all of these sort of frequencies. When we signed our cellular contract without reading the fine print, we inducted ourselves into this, you know, like frequency warfare suit kind of thing, right? Even if it was just on a symbolic level. And like it opened up a new way of thinking about all this like frequency soup we lived in for me. And that came from the person that like everything else they said was just the stupidest thing I'd ever heard, right? This thing. And so even if they weren't factually correct about this thing with the cellular thing on a symbolic or like an analogy level or a metaphor level, it really helped me to understand how it is that we were like had become okay with all this stuff that was happening. So I agree with you about what the fool's right sometimes. So we need to sort of I try and look at a diverse selection of information. I look at things that I totally agree with, things that I totally don't agree with, and everything in between. I listen to weirdos. I listen to like normies. I listen to jocks. I listen to artists. I really keep a wide spread there, and I think that's important. I want to go back to a second. I want to address China real fast. I think China, like the entirety of everything going on with China, whether it be issues related to viruses, issues related to like the dealings with technology, issues related to the stuff going on with Hunter Biden and Joe Biden, whatever, like the China thing is so complicated that most people just decide to ignore it instead. Or if they decide to look at it at all, they make it a very simplistic argument that is partisan or right-wing in nature or left-wing in nature or whatever. China is like, it's as complex as like the Israel and the Jewish question issue and all of that kind of stuff. There are so many layers and levels to it. And I think that a lot of people, and even some, a lot of people in the alternative research community, both people who present information and people who consume it, have just sidestepped it because some of these other versions of reality that leave China out of the picture are easier to understand.
Well, also the thing we have to understand about China, it is the only part of the world that hasn't fully been colonized by the white man. So what we have is we have a nation that is totally disconnected. Like the most important period of human history was when Alexander was on the border, Alexander the Great was on the border of China, and he asked his soldiers, the choice is yours, do we go in or do we not? And they were fatigued and they were like, no, we don't want to go there. But historians claim that if Alexander did in fact go there, he had the military experience and the amount of soldiers to actually win China. So that would have created an empire from the Pacific to the Mediterranean. And that would have changed our whole existence. There would have been that thread of Europe to China. But because that didn't happen, the British tried to get in, but they were only given little bits like Hong Kong and Shanghai, and the Portuguese were given Macau. But generally, they kept their own sovereignty. So there is a difference with them than any other. Every other part of the world has been conquered by the white man. So there is some sort of understanding and level But with China, it's completely separate. So this is the complexity of it. And like Israel, China is both a country and a race.
Yeah. Yep.
So that again leads to very complicated matters. And then with China, there is a dominant tribe, if you would like to call it, known as the Han, and everybody else is under them. So there is some sort of Indian type caste system based on where you are, what part of China you are. So there's all types of, and the other thing about China to end this bit is they believe they're the original humans of the planet, and everybody else is a mutation of them. So when a person goes to China, they're either called white devil or black devil.
Yeah.
So there's all of this, and then China is communist, but then they believe in something called the mandate of heaven, which is that every leader is basically allowed to be in that position via some sort of overall type of God. So even though the communists, they still see these like witch doctors or astrologists based in the old language or the old belief system. So it's a very contradictory nation. So this is why I think people are very simplistic about this whole COVID thing, because it requires detailed, deep study. And there's that many different sources. It takes time, and luckily for me, or maybe unluckily for me, I've got no kids, I've got no girlfriend, so I have the time, but not everybody has. But when you get a YouTube video, then that answers all of it. So yeah,
YouTube answers all. Yeah, I want to go back to what you said about masks, and what I said was that where the hoax exists, to the extent that there is one, is that a mask is going to sit the mask, right? Like it says literally on the box of masks that this doesn't protect from viruses. And people on both sides have lost. So the people who are, wanting to wear masks because they're believing everything that the government says or whatever, they can't get it through their head that never in the history of viruses have masks been an effective protectant. That isn't why surgeons wear masks and whatnot. So there's that. The mask has become where the battle is, right? The mask is the battle point. And so I agree with you. I personally prefer not to wear a mask. I prefer to rely on my own healthy immune system to protect both myself and other people, because I know that I'm not a huge, I'm not passing around all this stuff because my body is healthy. But I am to the point where I'm also not happy with people who are basically torturing people who are afraid by flaunting the fact that they're not wearing a mask in the mask wearer's face, right? I don't like that. So I think as a society, first of all, we must become tolerant of people who see things different than we do. And that be in the alternative media, the mainstream media, or at the grocery store, right? And, I think that people who are going along with the mainstream part of this, they need to learn to respect people who think something different than they do, right? And if their mask works, then they shouldn't need everybody else to wear one for theirs to work. They need to start to come to terms with that. But I agree with you that there are a lot of people who are in the alternative community, or even people who don't know a lot of alternative stuff, but they're super pro-Trump, and they've decided that the mask is part of the political issue, and they're going to not wear masks to taunt the left or to taunt the stupid people, the people that they think are stupid. I don't like that. If somebody comes to me, I in general don't wear a mask unless I'm someplace where it is required that I wear one. I will wear one to go into the grocery store, because I think just getting in an argument over that is not the hill I want to die on. But I respect people. I respect people who that is their fight, and as long as they do it with respect for other human beings, then I support them in their, I think Peggy Hall does a great job of trying to educate and do all this kind of stuff. For me, it's I'll put the mask on and whatever. Sometimes I take it off and on when I'm in the store because I like to breathe air or whatever. But when I go outside the park and stuff, I don't wear a mask. And, there's people there who seem afraid of me because I'm not. So instead of getting in their face, if I see someone who's coming towards me with the mask on, I assume that means that they believe in the virus to be terrifying, to be a threat to their life. and they're scared. So I will run around them more than 6 feet. So, right. To me, the mask is a symbol that a person is either scared. I mean, I don't look at it so much as that, oh, if you're wearing a mask, you're a sheep. I'm surprised that so many people haven't done more research, but whatever it is, they're scared or they feel like they need to wear it. So if I'm not wearing one and I see someone that's wearing one, I will kindly honor their wishes to not be frightened, right? And I will stay away from them. And as far as people in my personal life, like my father, who's older and he has the things that they say are risks for this, like he has diabetes and he's had heart surgery and all that kind of stuff. So I love my father and I don't want to taunt him or frighten him. So when I go to visit him, I sit 6 feet away from him and I wear a mask, even though it breaks my heart that my father is scared of me. You know, I don't think that a person who's already scared needs to be more scared. I don't find that helpful. So the people who are sneering down their nose at those who are wearing masks, I think is unacceptable. And I think the people who are wearing masks and sneering at people who aren't, so long as those people are not encroaching on their space, that has to stop too.
I have a solution to all this mask thing, and I've actually got it. It's called the pocket tissue.
Okay.
And what it is, last year when all life was normal, I'm getting on the train home and there's a man that looks like he works in an office. He sneezes in his hand, then snot comes out of his nose, which results in the following action: wiping it on his thigh. I'm sitting directly opposite this Viking, so luckily I always go with a spare one of these. And I'm like, you need it more than me, mate. And he was like, thank you, thank you. And that's it. So my philosophy is, if everybody had, I'm not trying to say I'm better than everyone, but if everybody had a standard of hygiene that included every winter, that is early October to mid-March every year, just walk around with one of these and have some hand sanitizer. We wouldn't need this, but because people are so dirty and nasty and filthy, this is how the normal flu runs wild on our health systems and causes people to die, and is billions spent that could be used, for instance, to combat child poverty. But what it is with people is people need to be told. So maybe like the Japanese do, maybe what we have to sadly do is in those winter months, when we're more inside of an environment that doesn't have good air conditioning, then we might need to wear the masks. But if we're outside and we've got the breeze and the wind, that's fair enough. But the amount of just raggedy, filthy, dirty, horrible skanks that I've seen, it just like eating a sausage roll out of a pack or a pastry, and they've not even washed their hands.
So I can't get on board with the required mask wearing of any sort, but I am on board with people just in general being more sanitary when they're interacting with others. Like it's interesting now you go to a restaurant and they have printed on something on the table that these are the things we do to make this COVID-19 safe. As we just wash down the table between customers. These are things people should have been doing all the time.
Exactly.
And even just like washing your hands with soap and water, like sanitizer, unless you have a good organic one, can actually, take away the good bacteria and weaken your immune system. But regular, good, clean, organic soap or whatever, I know somebody who works in a restaurant who suddenly after coronavirus started, like they were flying through soap and sanitizer at an alarming rate, whereas, she's a manager there. She'd never had to buy new soap or sanitizer the whole time she worked there. And then all of a sudden she's having to order it, and she realized that people were not washing their hands before, right? So, I mean, I think when what you do in your own house, if you want, is up to you. Some people are, like, some people like think that they're building their immune system by not doing that stuff and whatever. But when you're out in public, especially in places where you're eating and going to the bathroom and things like that, right? Or touching common things like a pole in the subway or on the bus or whatever, wash your hands once in a while, dude. I agreed with you. So I think that we can all be more, considerate of others in terms of like our sanitary habits, but yeah, the mask thing is just a harder thing, like it's not, I mean, I'm pro, just like people, like it's interesting, like the left is pro-choice. They want people to be able to decide for themselves about having babies aborted or not, right? But they're not pro-choice as far as vaccines, and they're not
exactly
pro-choice as far as masks. So we all have to become pro-choice and recognize. I mean, I don't like the idea of abortion or anything like that, but you never know unless you're the person who's having it, what's going on. So I encourage people to use other forms of birth control than an abortion, but it's not my right to make a decision for somebody else. But we have to be consistent in that, right? And so if somebody is choosing to wear a mask, then we should respect that, and they should respect our choice not to. And I haven't met yet anybody who's forcing themselves on somebody. I haven't met anybody who insists on going into someone's house without a mask or anything like that, right? So I think just this is a great time for us all to check ourselves on the way we respect the people around us. And also, are those people respecting our choices? And I think there has to be attention paid to that with everything, not just coronavirus.
The joke that I love about this period is the New York Transit Authority is now stating that they're cleaning the New York subway, and people that live in New York is like, you should have done that decades ago.
Right.
And it's just amazing. Like, yeah, we're actually getting teams to just disinfect the platforms once a day.
Right.
And people are like, well, why weren't you doing that before?
Right. It's brought some attention to some obvious gaping holes in our systems here, right? And so I think that aspect of things is good. And I just also wanted to remark on what you said about Alex Haley. There's a gentleman here in the United States, I can't remember his name right now. I think he has a TED Talk and he's been on Joe Rogan. He's an African American male who has converted many, many members of the KKK, right?
Oh yeah. He's a like blues singer or jazz singer.
Yeah. Right. And so I think, it's powerful, right? So like to have that kind of ability to, sort of through your own good behavior, disarm somebody else's. When I say good behavior, I don't mean being a good girl or a good boy, but through your own example of expressing your humanity, right? Even though maybe you've been wronged or offended or whatever by somebody, that's really the best tool for sort of, disarming the behavior that that we would like to have less of. So, all right, do you feel complete on the
I think the comments section is going to be on fire, as they say, due to that first section, and that's just the first one. So the next one is, and I've got a list. I'm not looking at a screen there like a guest on Joe Rogan, just seeing what the Rand Corporation want me to say in response to Emily. So the next one is around the importance of having an historical awareness around your ancestors, that being of your own genetic line, but of the greater ancestral pool of your nation and of the human species. And the reason why I bring this up is I have known now at least 4 people that have had very serious issues with mental health and mental imbalance. I know 2 people who aren't connected who are currently sectioned because they have basically lost the plot. And I know of 2 people, again, not connected, that have had suicide attempts around this period of time. So what happened, for people that don't know, in a shortened form, there was a man called Bernays. Bernays is the cousin or nephew of Sigmund Freud. He back engineers the work of Sigmund Freud in the early 20th century, and he creates this world we live in now in marketing and product placement.
Yeah,
meaning that
yeah,
meaning that you want things that you don't necessarily need,
yeah.
and then these things give the individual a status.
Mm-hmm.
So what's happened is we've all been programmed to be that way. I'm sure, Emily, you have a spot you like in LA where you go for food,
Mm-hmm.
or you have a particular bar you'd like to frequent. You might miss going to your wonderful Dodgers stadium to see them hopefully win it for the first time in 32 years. So there's all things like that we're all used to and we would all like to do. I miss going to Anfield to see Liverpool Football Club. But what we have to do is, if we look at the victories and defeats of our ancestors, we then realise that this, while serious, is no biggie. An example being 100 years ago, there was the Spanish flu, and according to medical academia, that took out 25% of the world's then population. That is like, even though the world's population is huge now, it's infallible to think the type of grief and depression and fear that our ancestors lived through that period of time. And then my own personal lineage, I had a grandfather who I never saw because he died before I was born, and he was torpedoed twice in the Merchant Navy in December off the coast of America. One was off the coast of North Carolina, and the other one was off the coast of New York City by German U-boats. And he was from Nigeria near the equator. And he was in this freezing December water. The second U-boat attack was 1 year and 1 day after the first. So he was in the water for the second attack for 2.5 hours, clinging onto a bit of driftwood from the ship. So whatever I'm going through, it's not that uncertainty. And then he comes back to the UK, and then he gets a job as a street sweeper in the city, and he has people spitting at him in the street, random people, and he can't fight back, because them days, if a black man, even with justification, did that, he would suffer severe punishment, either a hiding from the police or even being on the first boat back to Nigeria. So whatever I'm going through in this crisis, I don't have people spitting at me in the street. That would not be acceptable in 2020 because of my ethnicity. So what we have to do is we have to look at the victories and defeats, and we're hundreds of thousands of years. Some people say millions of years if you look into Tartaria, but that's a whole nother show. Yeah. But we could be the product of hundreds of thousands, if not longer, of ancestors. Emily Moyer could be a combination of pirate, vagabond, millionaire, serial killer, chief, goddess.
Somebody finally figured it out. How did you know, Darren?
So we're a product of all these different people. So if we don't know our own internal family bloodline, at least look at the greater picture and see what our countries have gone through. Like, before I hand it back to you, one of the most frightening parts of American history was America was that indebted to the banking system from Europe that the then president, I forgot who it was, ordered the army to take and confiscate all gold from citizens.
Right.
And that included people that had gold teeth. So soldiers were going around America plucking out teeth out of the gums of people. So so people have worked and scraped and saved, and they've got a bit of gold. Maybe they want it for a wedding, or they want it to leave for inheritance for their children. and soldiers are coming with rifles and bayonets and just tearing up their houses, smashing it up to find the gold hidden. And in some cases, I'm sure certain people were just shot and then they were rifling through the belongings and looting what they wanted. So this is the type of savagery and the type of heartache and struggle that has got us to have this conversation right now and the audience to watch us. So we have to use that in this time and period to boost us. So when we feel down, we remember. And if you have good relations with elders in your bloodline, like parents or grandparents or even great grandparents, talk to them, uncles and aunts, and they might reveal things to you that they've never revealed before about the stuff that they've gone through, good and bad. And then that can give you some encouragement. So please look out for each other. If you're a type of person that has an inner circle, well, that's great. But try to think of people out of that circle that, you know, they might not be your friends, they might be even acquaintances, but give them a call. What I do, I don't know if you've heard it on Facebook, but I do audio messages.
Yeah.
And I occasionally send it. It's like a mini podcast, and it's just my thoughts on what I'm seeing in the world, what I see out of this front window. This morning I was seeing a woman near me doing, looks like aerobics in a very energetic way, possibly Zumba, naked. And this is at 10 a.m. and I'm not looking for that. I'm no peeping Tom. I've just got the windows open and I'm on the phone talking to a friend, and in my eyesight, I just see things moving up and down. So I try to let people know about that, and then people can laugh and people can forget about it. Sometimes I get really serious, but I use the technology to reach out to people either via WhatsApp or via Facebook inbox. And I think that's what we've got to do. If we're alternative and we're sharing and caring and we want the world to be a better place, yet we can talk about QAnon, we can talk about Tartaria, we can talk about Elon Musk possibly being an alien. But the thing is that we have to start with the basics, which is love.
Yeah, no, I agree. A couple of things come up for me while you're talking about that. And the first is, I don't know if you either heard the recent show I did with Sophia Smallstorm or if you ever read her newsletters, but she's been doing a lot of interesting research on the Comanche Indians, which were like the most brutal tribe sort of ever in America, vicious, like able to defend themselves and survive unthinkable situations and whatnot. But when, you know, they were faced up against like some of these modern glamour items that were available from the white man, they fell prey to them. These were things that they didn't need, but they appealed to their vanity. And suddenly it was like they got blinded and hypnotized by that, and then couldn't even fathom the higher level weaponry and technology that was about to come from these people, and they were wiped out, right? These brutal, like savage Indians were wiped out because they too had an attraction for things that glittered but were not necessary. Right?
Like me and Nike trainers.
Like you and the Nike trainers, right? So I think this goes to the same things you're talking about. Sometimes, like, you know, in the things that we've become accustomed to because of modern conveniences, right, aren't really necessities and aren't necessarily worth arguing about or fighting the war on, insisting that our rights are being infringed upon if we can't have them right now. And when we spend time or waste time worrying about that kind of thing, then sometimes we miss the plot on the bigger issue. I think that's fair. I agree with you completely about touching base with people who've either been around longer than we have or who have different historical or cultural experiences, you know, and whatnot. And, you know, I think it's also interesting that like people who have certain kinds of stuff stored in their genetic memory, right? They've had different responses to what's going on now than people who have a different set of information stored in their genetic memory. Like, I noticed pretty early on that some people we know who were of Native American or, indigenous type of heritage as opposed to Western Anglo-Saxon or whatever, right? That they seemed to be initially much more fearful of this virus because in their history, they have like what happened with Spanish flu or flea bear, that part of how, I think, was it Spanish flu or which one was it, where the Europeans came over and gave blankets to the Indians?
Smallpox,
right? Or whatever it was, right? So even if these people now didn't experience it, it's in their ancestral and genetic memory. So they actually have a good reason for being, on edge more than we are, and we should be sensitive to that. I think, where the important line is that we have to be very careful about not just allowing what's going on right now to change the way we all live permanently forever in every way, right? Like, I think we have to be resistant to this sort of forced into a surveillance and tracing kind of system. We have to be vigilant about not allowing laws, that are there for protection of liberty to be changed, that because the governments don't go back on that stuff. They don't infringe on your liberties and then stop. I think that so we have to be careful about that stuff. And sometimes in order to mount a good resistance to those kinds of measures, we have to choose to be mature and behave in a certain kind of responsible way so that certain measures aren't necessary. But it's a complicated thing because, there is, and this is where, we're in America, and America has a different history with liberty than England does, right? Like in America, the rule is I do what I want. Don't tell me what to do, right?
Don't tread on me.
Don't. For some people, yes, that's not ever been a part of my view of America necessarily. That's not like, I think that's a very much more of a sort of Southern thing. And I'm not saying this in any critical way. I think it's a reasonable position to have and whatnot. But for me, it's just kind of like, I want to do what I want to do, so I'm going to let you do what you want to do and whatnot. And so, and it's part of why people want to come to America. They want to have the right to do what they want to do and not be told what to do, and so, I think that it's important that we stand our ground on these things. And it's also important in our day-to-day personal interactions that we show like a greater level of nuance in the way we're approaching some of this stuff and the way we interact with people based around it.
Can I ask you a personal question?
Sure.
My ethnicity is the following: Swedish, Scottish, Irish, Italian, Portuguese, Nigerian, Jamaica, Barbados, Guyana. So I'm literally the United Nations.
Yeah.
So I've always been interested and intrigued by your heritage. I've always believed or speculated that you have Mayan ancestry or ancestry native to where you are from. Would that be correct in that? So
everybody thinks that. So I have this weird thing where like, almost everywhere I go, the people think I'm from there. So when I'm in Mexico, they think I'm from there. When I'm in South Africa, they think I'm from there. Wherever I am, like if I'm in Brooklyn, they think I'm from there. I'm here, right? So the heritage that I understand from my family is that my mother is German and Dutch, and my father is basically Ashkenazi Jew with like a lot of Eastern European, Russian, maybe some Slavic kind of things, that kind of background. However, I will say this. I have indigenous people from places all over the world say that I have like that complete look, like that South American, Central American sort of Mayan look, certain kinds of people from Africa or Egypt. Like a lot of people think that I'm like Sumerian, right? Some people say I look like the Spanish Sephardic Jews. I don't know what's going on. I have a lot of suspicions about things, as I've talked about with project stuff, that I don't know if I'm some kind of experiment from the laboratory at Tavistock, where I may have been conceived, that is just like a mixture of things. Our good friend Robert Phoenix gave me an impromptu psychic reading one time where he was like, and I don't think he was talking about like as far as countries, but like more like planets or dimensions, that I was like some sort of bizarre patchwork experiment of a million different kinds of things. I don't know. So I don't look really like the rest of my family. They're much lighter skinned than I am. We all have dark hair and light eyes. Like they have visual issues. They all had braces. They had, there's just different sort of physique. So there's definite differences, but no, but I feel a resonance with that. Like I was always much more strongly attracted to those cultures than I am to the ones that are supposedly my own. Although I do have some attraction to like German things based on my love for techno and my former love for, gummy candies and things like that and whatnot. But I think that, I certainly resonate with a lot of the South American stuff, a lot of the Middle Eastern stuff, like Sumerian, Egyptian kind of stuff like that. And even I could not believe how much I enjoyed and felt resonance with Africa when I was there. It surprised me. So I don't know. I'm maybe a United Nations as well.
I think maybe millions of years ago when there was Pangea, I think maybe people look like you. So you're just like the past in our present, because there is something very unique about how you are.
Yeah.
And there's a time traveler just going into the portal behind us.
Yeah.
There you go. So that's it.
That's the pocket door to the pocket universe, kind of,
There you go. I knew there was something about you. So the next point we're going to talk about is something rather hilarious. It should be serious, but the whole nation has gone into silly mode, and it is the current mood. So at the moment, at the time that we're having this conversation, Wales, which is run like an American state with its own governor, a man called Mark Drakeford, whose title is First Minister for Wales, has decided, due to Halloween being on a Saturday this year, and then 6 days later is the annual 5th of November. Both times of the year it's party season. People will have a Halloween party, and then people on the 5th of November will have a bonfire party. So because of this, with the risk of infections as it's increasing, and COVID works better between a -1 degree Celsius and 4 degrees Celsius, according to mainstream academia. That's not my view, that's mainstream academia virologists. So what Mark Drakeford has done in his position, having political control of Wales, he's decided that all non-essential items in supermarkets cannot be purchased.
For just that week?
No, for 17 days.
Okay.
So what's happened is a woman went to a supermarket, a Tesco supermarket, to buy sanitary products, and they were told by members of staff, some of which were female, that sanitary products were deemed non-essential. So it's now caused the people of Wales to be utterly perplexed with Drakeford's leadership. He is now defaulted to say it is up to now individual supermarket chains to decide what is and isn't essential. So the reason why he's brought in this essential rule is because he wishes to protect businesses that sell books or sell clothes. The supermarkets sell them as well, and things such as birthday cards and gift cards.
So that if the small businesses can't sell it, neither can the big ones, so that the pain is felt equally.
Exactly. But this is now a worry, because all it's done is made a certain Mr. Bezos and a certain Mr. Thiel even richer, because people will either go on Amazon or they will go on eBay. And it's got so ridiculous. What Americans call dishcloths, or what we call tea towels, have been deemed non-essential. So it's just the land of, it's just people, I don't know if it's the stress of all of this and not having your hedonism and having your favourite restaurants, or maybe it's the fear, and it's all the fear and the lack of hedonism combined. But it seems that people are losing their minds at leadership level.
Well, it seems like, well, first of all, there's a lot of stuff to address there, but it seems like he's having his like petty dictator moment that like Gretchen Whitmer here, who's the petty dictator of Michigan, had, where she was basically like closing down certain aisles in the stores, saying that you can't buy these items or these items, but you can buy these items, right? And so I think part of this is just the same people that are making decisions have also had the oxygen cut off to their brains from the masks. So it's a combination of their egos run wild, but also not really thinking clearly, because that's a recipe for just that. No, people aren't going to be happy with that. But I think we have to have, and this goes not just for this COVID period of time, right? Hold on a second, I have a sneeze. It goes for in general, right? Who gets to
no hand sanitizer, audience. She didn't use the hand sanitizer.
Yeah, nope. Yeah, but I will wash my hands before I go eat something when I leave the recording here. Anyway, so I think that this discussion about who decides what is essential and what is not essential, and should we even be doing that, right? Like, what is essential for you is very different than what's essential for me. Like, I'm one of these people, and this is a pain in the ass quality about myself. Like, I have some good qualities, apparently, people say, but I'm going to be the first to say I also have a lot of pain in the ass qualities. And one of my pain in the ass qualities is that I need to be 100% in charge of what I'm eating, right? Like, I'm not good with just like going along and we'll grab anything to eat and like, or, just eat from the buffet at the whatever. Like, it doesn't work for me on a variety of levels. Like, like I don't, like, it's just kind of like for some people, they can put whatever gas in their car, but certain cars you need like the 92 octane gas, and other cars need the 87. Like my car runs better on a certain thing, but it isn't even that. Like, for me, it's just like what I choose to put into my body is really important, and it goes to my mood, and it goes to how well I sleep, and it goes to a million other things. And I'm not even saying that all of them are rational, but I am the only person qualified to decide what things are going to go in my body, both like on a health level, but also like, I don't like to just eat whatever's around. Like, I don't even like, even within my own house, like I have to have the thing to eat that is what I want to eat. And what I mean by that is, it's not always like, oh, I need to have steak and lobster every time I want it, right? But like, I just, whatever's around, or like, we're walking down the street and everyone agrees, let's just stop into the Sizzler. Like, that is not going to work for me. And if I can't control that on a certain level, I don't mean I have to be in control of everything, but the things I eat, I kind of do, right?
So is that why you prefer cocktails? So if you were hosting a party, it would be a cocktail party rather than food.
No. So to me, like, I like cocktails because I like something that's special. Right? When you open, like, I'm not saying that there are no beers and wines and whatever that are special, right? But like, it's a different kind of thing. Like, the cocktail to me has been fussed and trimmed over just for me, right before it's been made. The primming and fussing and whatever with the wine happens many steps before it arrives at my door. And I like some beers and I like some wines, but I really like a cocktail. I like something that was just made especially for me. And the same with the meal. I don't like eating at buffets or cafeterias or anything like that. I want something that is made just for me the way that I like it. And I also like doing that for other people, right? Like,
so you're not a person that would go to, say, my place and I'd say, right, Emily, I'm cooking. I would have to come to you and say, what do you specifically like?
No, it wouldn't. I'm not that fussy. But if you're inviting me over,
milady,
if you're inviting me over for dinner, right? Like, generally when I invite somebody over for dinner, like, unless I already know, I will inquire as to what things that they like to eat. Like, for me, like, I'm on usually mostly either a carnivore or a keto diet or whatever, right? Now, it doesn't mean that I don't ever eat things other than that. I do. But if you were having me over for dinner, I would assume that you would ask me, hey, do you like this? I'm thinking about making this. Do you like this? Right? Kind of thing. And then I love someone's graciousness in inviting me over for dinner and whatnot. But like, you know, and every once in a while you get in a situation where you have to eat something you totally don't like to be polite. But I can't have that in a situation where then I'm also expected to be functional immediately there afterwards, right? Like, and this comes from having been an athlete. Like, I can't eat a crappy meal the day before you gotta have the gymnastics meet, or it's hard, or I can't control. You know, it makes a mess for me, right? Like, I would like that.
I would love the experience one day, hopefully, when I visit Los Angeles, to see you experience eating a food you don't like. I think it would be the most hilarious thing, where you would be like, thank you, that was really nice.
There's only a few foods I don't like in terms of like, I really actually have a small list of things that I don't like at all. For me, it's more about like the quality of the food. Like, I like really good food. Right? And to me, like, I'd rather sometimes, not always, I'm not walking myself into the corner that people can, you know, get me stuck in here. I'm not going to say that in all cases I'd rather have nothing than have something that isn't good. But in a lot of cases, I'd rather have nothing than have something that isn't good. But I also extend that to other people. Like, if you were to come over here for to visit my house, I would find out just what cocktail you really like. What's your favorite fruit? What's your favorite herb? What's your favorite liquor? And I would make something special for you. So it's not like I have a different set of expectations or rules for like how I treat other people than how I treat myself, right? So,
and this is why, audience, we're having this conversation, because one of the faults with the alternative research community is people want the juicy stuff. They want the things that they've never heard before. And what we're doing is we're engaging in something called a human conversation that interweaves with alternative research. Because ultimately, if you watch Emily, and hopefully you're subscribing to the Emily Moyer YouTube channel below, therefore you have to know who Emily is. And this is part of it. We have too many people in the industry or in the community that are giving information, but they're not giving anything about themselves. And this is what we have. This is what we have to do. I have things with Alex Jones, audience. The reason why is he talks Jesus this, Jesus that. But when we see what Mrs. Alex Jones number 2 was up to and what she was doing and how they met, then we start saying, well, he ain't that Christian, is he? Because he wouldn't have done that to his first wife, because you say to love and to hold and to death do you part, and you say these things if you're a Christian. So at the end of the day, we have to look at the person for who they are, what is their motivation, but more importantly, their humanity. They can have a laugh, they can talk about the idiosyncrasies, they can talk about what they like, what they don't like. It gives you a fuller picture of the individual. So for all these people, we will now get back on track to the least... how can I say this without swearing? The least competent Prime Minister the UK has had since Neville Chamberlain, and that is one Boris Johnson. And what has happened with our Prime Minister, believe it or not, I don't even know we got that. He is now leaking through the media that he intends to quit next year because the job doesn't pay enough. So what he wants now, he's got a young mistress who's also his fiancée. He's the first Prime Minister to be both married and have a fiancée at the same time. They've just had I think it's his 7th child or his 6th child altogether with various different women. And apparently his younger lover obviously wants to live that jiggy life. And being Prime Minister of Britain on £150,000 a year or $193,000 a year is not good enough for her. So he wishes to do the speaking engagement tours where people will hear him waffle and talk and try to give these nonsense bits of insight that Johnson does for £750,000 an hour. and he will just be a person on the speaking circuit.
Mm-hmm.
So that's what's happening. And then people are realizing this, and then it links to one of the themes that is currently in your work, Emily, and that is around athletes and athletes that use their position to then promote change in society. And this has been done by a soccer player, an elite one, called Marcus Rashford, who is openly challenging Boris Johnson's leadership. And because basically soccer is the national obsession, it has got people who aren't political interested. And what Rashford is talking about is childhood poverty, and particularly children that can't eat or eat very little because there's issues within the home. So he's obviously from a home, Rashford, that he has a single parent. His mother brought him up and they had very little. But because of his talent and him now playing for Manchester United and also for England as the striker, the goal scorer, it's given him a profile within professional sport. But he's now used that to work with charities during the lockdown in March. And he actually goes into food bank centres and distributes food to people, gets food off wagons, puts them and sorts them into bags. So he is now the nation's Captain England. Let's say you've got Captain America, Captain England.
Yeah.
So he's now overtly challenging Boris Johnson to the point where he has sent Boris Johnson a formal letter asking for a meeting or some sort of video conference between the two to get an understanding on how to deal with childhood poverty. And Johnson does not want to engage in that meeting. So we've got sportsman versus prime minister. We've got working class man versus top elite. And Johnson said in a BBC documentary that you can access, was probably on YouTube, about ancestry called Who Do You Think You Are? That he can trace his ancestry to one of the lieutenants of William the Conqueror over 1,000 years ago. So that is the lineage and power of Boris Johnson's bloodline. So we've got this interesting dynamic. And the other one is Rashford has now been given an MBE for his work in charity.
What is an MBE?
A member of British Empire.
Okay.
And it is the first level to get ultimately to a knight, a sir or a knight. So that is obviously being given by, I believe, Prince William, who is a keen soccer fan and also is the patron of the professional game in England. So we've got football at top, and he's being protected by a higher top, which is Prince William. So we've got this interesting nexus of Johnson versus Rashford.
So I see there's a couple things there that I find interesting. So first of all, you said about Boris Johnson wanting to leave in 2021 when Brexit supposedly is going to finally happen. There's obviously like this mirroring or parallel between Donald Trump and Boris Johnson, both based on their appearance and how they sort of came to power based on this image they painted of themselves as populists or more with the people. And so it will be interesting to see if Donald Trump goes in January as well, right? If Joe Biden wins or some other thing happens and Trump leaves office at the same time that Boris Johnson says he's leaving office of his own choice, but maybe it's really been he's performed his service, his duty, he's played his role or whatever, and now it's time for him to exit off into something else, right? I think that's if you think there are so many similarities between Boris Johnson and Donald Trump. They look very similar. They have the same ridiculous hair. They're the only two major leaders that have gotten COVID, and they both recovered, right? Like we have Putin, as far as we know, Putin hasn't had COVID. Xi Jinping hasn't had COVID. You know,
Merkel has had it.
She has.
Yeah, but they've covered it up very good in Germany.
Okay.
She had it, and then she was okay, but she wasn't seen for about 3 weeks.
Well, that's a long time.
And he said, she was just on vacation.
But I think
That's
both with Donald Trump and with Boris Johnson, their time in the hospital or away from the spotlight was used to hear the possibilities, alert them of what the situation is going to be, what part they're going to play, what the transition is going to be at this point, right? There's going to be a shift in something. Maybe they were replaced by a clone. Maybe they were reprogrammed. Whatever your version of reality is, they both had this interesting window, right, where they were brought down by something they weren't sure that they believed in, right? And then they kind of came out on the other side, like a little different or whatnot. But it would be interesting if both he and Trump exit, stage left at the same time. That would be interesting. As to what you were saying here about, you had something in here that you didn't talk about in terms of this school in North London. Right.
Sorry. There's a famous school in London called Harrow. There's two. There's Eton and there's Harrow. And if Johnson, one of the things being leaked is that Johnson feels that if he stays in politics, combined with his younger lover wanting a certain quality of life, he won't be able to afford to send their son Wilfred eventually to Harrow.
So this feels coded to me. Okay, go ahead. Finish your thought. Well,
Harrow is very special because some of its alumni is Winston Churchill and a link with your favourite game, tennis. The very first Wimbledon's men's single champion came from there, a man called Spencer Gore, who was seen as the creator of the volley in tennis. So it's a very illustrious, a number of prime ministers all over the world have been educated there whilst being children. A number of Nobel award winners, Nobel Prize winners have been there. So the academic fee this year in 2020 is £41,775 an academic year, or in American dollars, that is $54,000, 391. So that is.
So there's an interesting code in there to me, right? Because I've talked about how I think tennis is often used to sort of stage a battle, like an archetypal, symbolic kind of battle or whatnot, right? Now, we're not talking about Wimbledon here, but if you just watched the French Open, which was a few weeks ago, that happened at the wrong time of the year, right? What you saw was Novak Djokovic employing a new tactic, which is, in my opinion, overused, but using a drop shot, which he's never been particularly good at before. And it was very successful for him for a good portion of the tournament. He was playing a lot of drop shots, right? And it was working for him. And what a drop shot does will cause the person to have to run forward and hit a
volley.
And it worked once or twice on Rafael Nadal and then just didn't work out anymore after that kind of thing, right? So we saw this absolute reintroduction of like a drop shot as a very, very frequent shot, and therefore way more volleys being played as well, therefore exposing people who were not good at playing a volley, right? And if Nadal happens to be very good at volleying, right? So it's kind of interesting what you're talking about here, like, right, that this guy, Spencer Gore, I'm not saying that there's a correlation here, but you can always find these ideas that are being bantered about politically. You can find them being reflected in the sports world and vice versa. Also, Novak Djokovic is a person who's very much taken advantage of his position in sport to press things that he thinks are important in maybe a very different way than this soccer player that you're talking about has done.
Marcus Rashford.
Yeah, but it is interesting when you begin to have sports figures and either political or business figures sort of start to team up and oppose the president or the other major political parties or whatever, because the sports star, just like the rock star, is much more culturally powerful than the quote unquote politician, right? Kind of thing. They have a certain draw. Like you're seeing people become interested in politics for the first time in their life, not based on some understanding of policy, but based on what their favorite celebrity is tweeting about or hashtagging, right? And
well,
so,
Christiana Kubrick, Stanley Kubrick's wife, was interviewed by The Guardian about 10 years ago. And she said something very, very important that got a lot of people's attention. And she says that people in power try to manipulate and almost handle artists because they are scared of them. And she said that the number one section of society that the power structure is frightened of is artists.
I'm sure. I mean, artists and on a certain level, athletes, right?
Yeah, like, exactly.
Right. That's why you see this obsession Bill Gates has with Roger Federer, right? Like that's an unusual one to me. Larry Ellison is best friends with Rafael Nadal. Larry Ellison.
Anna Wintour's friends with Roger Federer.
Right. You have, this long history of so I think that like Anthony Fauci is really good friends with an artist from Broadway who lost a lot of family and friends to the initial part of the HIV or the AIDS crisis that Anthony Fauci largely presided over, and then now they're like best friends, like almost like that had to happen to stop the artist community's criticism of the government based on their handling of AIDS. So yeah, you definitely see a lot of that. And if someone's not willing to play along, like you see a lot of harsh criticism of Novak Djokovic because he's not really willing to get on board with all the same things that the other players are willing to get on board with, right? And I don't know if you're aware of what's going on right now, but there's a battle going on within tennis. There is a breakaway government forming within tennis that Novak Djokovic is heading. It's been going on for a couple of weeks now, but it's really starting to heat up in some ways. But Novak Djokovic was the president of the Players' Council for the ATP, which is the Men's Tennis Professional Association. And he during the U.S. Open quit that position to announce that he had started his own Players Association with some other players as well. And they're now sort of in a battle, like Rafael Nadal and Roger Federer are for the ATP, and Djokovic is for this new thing that gives the players more power and whatnot. And we're seeing modeled out in the governmental bodies of tennis something that I think is like a model for what's going to happen in some of these governments of the world, just like we saw play out in the gymnastics governing body. The whole thing with Larry Nassar and the pedophilia was almost a trial run for how the Jeffrey Epstein situation was going to be handled as it threatened the government of the United States and other governments.
Well, this segues beautifully. This is why I like our conversations, because they have symmetry into what's going on in my hometown in Liverpool, United Kingdom. And it has gone completely full on conspiracy theory. There are people that I have encountered who I believe would never talk the things they have talked about since March on issues to do with 5G, extraterrestrial involvement in a possible cover-up, governments trying to make the whole of the 99% become serfs, and then they have the rest of the wealth, and they buy everything up on the dollar or on the pound. So there's all of these things. So what happened was, the area where I live is called the Liverpool City region. And it has a number of mayors in Liverpool, Knowsley, Wirral, Sefton, and maybe Chester. And then over them is an overall boss called the Metro Mayor. So they talked with Boris Johnson, and then they came to a decision that because of the rates being high, they had to close all gyms. And then this led to the community that uses gyms, because gyms, like retail shopping parks, are the new churches. People don't go to places of worship anymore. It's either retail parks or gyms. So what happened now was that people within the gym community in the Liverpool City region were defying the orders to close, and one individual who is a personal trainer in boxing and also possibly owns his gym in the Aintree area of Liverpool, where the famous Grand National horse race happens, went on his own Instagram and gave a rallying call for the people of Liverpool to not watch the soccer, which whilst has no fans is still going on. And rather than watch the derby between the two teams in the city, Everton and Liverpool, to go on a protest against this. Mm-hmm. And then he stated that after the protest, a movement should happen in which it is about human empowerment and freedom. And that entails people going to the homes of MPs surrounding them in peaceful protest. Now, this Instagram video has gone round the Scouse or Liverpool social media network, and I believe it is the catalyst for the MPs and the Metro Mayor to ask the government to reinstate the gyms being open. Mm-hmm. So in a few days after having this conversation we're having, the gyms are going to reopen. Mm-hmm. And then at the same time all of these protests were happening, the Robert Pattinson Batman film, the latest interpretation of that character, was being filmed in the city, with Batman being on Robert Pattinson, filmed on the Liver building, which is the iconic building of my city, where the symbol of it, the Liver bird, is on top of. So Liverpool for a while felt very Gotham-y. Mm-hmm. You had it's like sort of Bane in The Dark Knight Rises. Yeah. You had this like boxing gym instructor who's 6'4", and he's instructing the people to rise up. And then there's a mass protest outside the public monument. And then at the same time, people are seeing Batman on top of buildings all over the city. So it added to this like weird intensity. And then personally for me, I have said from the beginning that I think unless we get a vaccine cure by April 2021, there will be riots throughout this country. People won't be able to deal with it. And my inspiration for this came from a Batman graphic novel called War Games, in which Batman has a emergency plan that if it all goes to hell in Gotham, he, Bruce Wayne Batman, is going to go under another alias called Matches Malone, and then unify all the villains in Gotham and then manipulate them till order can arrive. But then this emergency plan is took by another villain and then activated. So Batman is sort of the great planner, is trying to hack and manipulate and back engineer his own plan, or Gotham goes crazy. So the inmates are out of Blackgate, the supervillains are out of Arkham, the street gangs are raping women in the street, the police aren't doing anything, they're staying home, protecting their property and family, and it's just left to Batman and his gang to sort this out. So it was very interesting that I had War Games, the graphic novel, in my head, and then another one called Contagion, which is about a supervillain called Ra's al Ghul, who then gives a contagion all over the world, and people start frothing at the mouth and dying, and Batman and his boys and his affiliates have to go all over the world and get bits of herb and bits of rare this and that to come with the cure. So I had Contagion, I had War Games, and this was going on, and Batman was being filmed, and people were freaking out because they were just driving on the road and they just saw Batman on top of the Liver building at 120 feet. And they're like, what's Batman doing in Liverpool? So it was all going off, really. So, yeah, so it's very surreal over here.
So that's interesting. So we've had some of the similar stuff over here with gym owners leading certain kind, like there was a gym owner here in New Jersey that kept getting locked out of his gym by this local government, and he kept breaking in and opening it anyway. And, this was going on and on and on. So we've had some of that kind of thing as well here. Like the gyms here are still closed. And I think your point about the gyms and the shopping centers replacing the religious get-togethers and things like that is very interesting. And so when people don't have their place where they go for their sort of religious activity, they begin to go a little bit batty and nutty. It's an interesting way to sort of rally people up. But to the Batman thing, the Batman symbolism, the actual symbol, and then of course the franchise, both in terms of like the comic and in terms of the movie series, is very, very important, both in MK Ultra style mind control programming and cultural programming in general. I don't know if you know this, but if you look at the spinal column from a top-down view, it looks exactly like the Batman insignia. So there's something very deep inside of us that connects to that symbolism. It's an incredibly powerful tool for mind control on a massive and on a one-on-one level.
Well, we've all had areas where we've been in nightclubs or we've been on public transport and we've seen a group of people being obnoxious. Mm-hmm. And we've all wished we had that martial arts training, mm-hmm. like a Bruce Wayne, to say something sarcastic. And then four of them turn and go, "Who are you?" And then we've got the ability just to do that. And then they're just all knocked out.
Yeah.
And we've all had that in us where we've seen unpleasant behaviour, but then that character, that sort of has that ability. And I think we live through that character because I think we do want something negatively in us, want street justice. Yeah. It's very clean cut, basic. It gets it done. It doesn't involve expensive lawyers and appeals and corrupt judges and police. Right. It's just
the ability to take justice into your own hands is something that we all both fear and also like desire on a certain level. But I think the Batman stuff has been really rolled into a lot of current political stuff, obviously with some of the things around like the Sandy Hook and all of that kind of stuff with some of the, and the Batman shooting and whatever. But even right now, so you're like this feel like the whole world sometimes feels like Gotham City right now with the things that are going on. But even just right before all this crazy shit kicked off with COVID and then the rioting based on the George Floyd stuff, like earlier this year or late last year, there was the movie Joker, right? Which was basically, sort of that idea of like taking the fight straight to the politicians' homes or straight to them instead of through just regular street demonstrations. I mean, that was going on here a bit. Like some of the protesters and rioters in Chicago went to Lori Lightfoot, that ghoul that looks like Beetlejuice, took it to her home, right? Which then caused her to create a new set of laws to protect herself, right? And I actually feel like, which was the height of hypocrisy, like right now during these times where these people, these mayors, these city managers, these governors and whatnot are making all kinds of immoral, actually unlawful and unconstitutional edicts and mandates that are affecting everybody's personal life. You cannot do that and then say, but you can't bring the fight to my personal life, right? They're not sticking to their roles as mayors, governors, and whatever, which is basically to, carry out the will of the people and obey, the state constitution or the federal, the federal constitution. They're not doing that. They're making decisions that affect people on a very personal level, but then saying, but don't bring the fight to me. Right.
Yeah. Well, it's like when you hear about like when a police officer passes away or a first responder and they say, well, anybody that is guilty of attacking or even ending the life of a first responder should get a harsher sentence. Mm-hmm. And it's like, well, no, because what you're then doing, you're saying one life is worth more than another. Mm-hmm. Yeah. And it's hypocrisy. And it even happened with the very bizarre Joker-esque mayor of Seattle. And she was on Chris Cuomo's show. And when there was Chomp, that sort of hippie occupied zone where they took over a police precinct, she went to Chris Como giggling in an insane way, stating that it could mean a second summer of love. But when they went to her home, she then called the SWAT team in. And it was literally, they were told on a loud hailer, if you don't vacate this area in 3 minutes, we're shooting on sight. And so you see, so this is what it is. There's a hypocrisy within the metropolitan liberal elite where they wish to enforce their dogma, but they don't wish to walk it. And this is what people have to realize.
Rules for thee, but not for me. Okay, Darren, I think that's a good place for us to wrap. We've gone a long time. This is an extra long first segment for everybody out there. We're going to take a quick break, and then we're going to go over to the Patreon segment where we're going to complete Darren's list. And there are some.
Can I just give them a little teaser so they can in the future join your Patreon site?
Absolutely.
We are going to talk about social media manipulation. We are going to talk about the very cagey conversation between one Joe Rogan and one Matthew McConaughey. We're going to talk about fashion, and then we're also going to talk about sexual fetishization.
All right. Darren, let people know where they can find your ramblings and your rantings.
I am available on Twitter. I don't do a blog. I don't have a website. I don't have a YouTube channel. So if you want to get in contact with me, it is on the Twitter. Now, for Americans, this is very hard because of this very strange accent. So it is Daz, D-A-Z, Alt, A-L-T, and Fairy, as in science, not Tinkerbell. So that is Daz Alt Fairy. You can get me. It's a public Twitter. It's not private. And I hopefully will entertain you. So thank you, Emily, for having me. And part 2 awaits for the VIPs.
All right. Join us at patreon.com/Off Planet Media for the rest. We'll be back in just a minute. Thanks, guys. All right.